think people who sell on Zoom calls, phone calls, can learn stage selling? What's the real skill difference?
Well, anybody can learn anything. That's my belief. I got my first sales job at 23 years old, selling dental products over the phone to dentists. Terrible communicator. I mumbled. I was terrible, but I was really competitive, and I read all the sales books. Only one I thought was decent, spin selling. It helped me a lot, but I realized a lot of it was my own mindset, my confidence, my ability to articulate words. It's really amazing now when I speak on some of these stages. Some people know who I am. Most people don't know who the frick I am. When I speak at a seminar now, I have more personal sales than everybody in the room combined.
If someone wants to do a webinar, or they've been running a webinar already, and they want to get some advice or work with you on it, is that something that you do? Is that something that you can help people with?
We've got like a program where I'm basically pretty much writing people's webinars for them, and it's been very, very successful.
Eli, it's very good to have you on.
Great to see you, brother.
How are you?
I'm amazing. Things are good over here in Miami.
We met 2 or 3 months ago, and I've already been following you for, I think I've known of you for 4 or 5 years, even before I got into the high ticket space. Before I even know about online sales, and I worked in sales in general, I would see you talking about influence in some way. So I think this podcast, because we're all around sales, sales management, you're really stage selling, live selling. I think we can really deep dive on sales, and anyone who's listening to this, if they're a sales nerd, they will absolutely love this.
Yeah, absolutely.
For anyone that doesn't know about your history, that doesn't know about the 20 years of work that you've put in before today, tell us all about what you've been doing and what you've done in the past.
I'll try to keep it brief. I've done a lot in these 20 years, but I started out, I got my first sales job at 23 years old, selling dental products over the phone to dentists. Terrible communicator. I mumbled. I was terrible. I was the worst. But I was really competitive, and I read all the sales books. Only one I thought was decent, spin selling. And then, it's a bit dated now, but it helped me a lot. But I realized a lot of it was my own mindset, my confidence, my ability to articulate words and just feel good about, being a pest back there. That was my label for myself. And I knew that, even though I was saying the same words as other people on the same script, there was something inside of my mind, my internal script, and how I saw myself and how my ability to connect and overcome resistance and even say the things with confidence and to go out there. And so I got into all the internal stuff, hypnosis, self-confidence books, believe in yourself type books. And I thought a lot of it was kind of airy-fairy. There was some this and that, but then I came across a body of work called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, for those of you guys who don't know. And it was different than anything I heard. And there was a couple kind of tenets that were really useful to me. And it's like, for anybody that doesn't know what NLP is, it's not some hocus pocus thing. It's really the science of excellence in communication, where they found people that they were great, therapists or hypnotists or salespeople. They did crazy amounts of studies and research on not just what they were saying, but their mental syntax and what they believed. And they found ways that we could model these belief patterns, model these syntaxes, the order and sequence through which people thought through internal communication with themselves that became unconscious. Because you see somebody that's a master in anything, they've got a mental processing, and they found ways that you could simply model that. And also there was this tenet that really saved my life. That was, if something's off in your life, it's not you. There's the power, the potential of who you are, but you have patterns of thought, patterns of feeling, patterns of communication. And just like we can shift our muscles or our posture or even our breathing patterns, we can change these patterns. And so I was in a mindset that I was broken, something wrong with me, I'm just not good. But I began to create space through these techniques. And I found it really useful in how I showed up in calls and conversations. And it really helped me out a lot to kind of rebuild my confidence, my foundation, how I could feel good about what I was doing each day and not just read some script where I wasn't associated to it. And then there was a different sense of certainty and presence and power and, and also like a sense of excitement. Like, this is a game. This is like an experiment, as opposed to this is like my self-worth. This is my income. And the crazy thing about this is when you are in sales, like I was, it was a 100% commission job. So like, if you're not good, you don't eat. And so there's some stress involved. And then there's a leaderboard. There was about 300 salespeople, and I was the worst. But within about a year, I was the top person, and then I dominated in that world, and I became good friends with the owners, Robert Heyman, Bill Dorfman. It was a dental company, and they were becoming really famous in their own right, and they mentored me a bit, and I saw things in them, in their leadership, and how they communicated, their presence, like when there was an expectation, when they spoke, that people would respond to them. Just the words landed. There was like an expectation and there was an energy there. And I began to model some of the things I saw in how they carried themselves, what they believed about themselves. And I was talking to a friend about some of the shifts I was having one day, and he goes, "Oh, NLP. Well, you've heard of Tony Robbins." I'm like, you study Tony Robbins. I'm like, "Who's Tony Robbins?" And he's like, "You don't know Tony Robbins?" The next thing I know, I went on to eBay, and I went on to Amazon, and I got Personal Power, the book, for 68 cents, used copy plus shipping. And I went on to eBay, and I got his Personal Power 2. It was the tapes for like $17. I got Get the Edge. It was like $59, just all used stuff. And I didn't have who has a tape player at home, but I had an old car. And I remembered getting that Personal Power 2, sitting in my car, just sitting there listening to these tapes for like 8 hours. And Tony's like, "When I say do an exercise, pull over," and I'm like pulling over to the side of the road, LA traffic. I'm writing things down. I'm crying. I'm taking down all these notes. And I'm like, who is this man? And I listened to all these self-development audios on sales or, just life. And you could tell it was a good reader, maybe even the author of these self-development concepts, but they weren't associated, or you could tell they were basically just reading. And this guy was unfiltered. He didn't have any script. And I was like, what is this man on? Is this man on drugs? Like, what's going on here? And he mentions he seeds, which I'll talk about in a little bit, as a strategy. If you're speaking, or even if you're doing, like for those of you listening, you'll hear me do a couple seeds about things I have coming up in this podcast. And if you are presenting in a sales call or on stage, we're sculpting behavior, we're shifting belief, and we're seeding next steps or seeding things. And so as Tony's talking on these CDs, every once in a while, he'll mention working with this client. It's not like, "Hey, just so you know, I work with clients." That's neat. He's telling stories about it. So you already know that he works with clients. And so at our events at this UPW where people do this, so he's not pitching it, but he's seeding it. And I was like, man, he planted a seed in my mind. Like, be freaking cool to go to one of those events and walk on some fire. That sounds pretty cool. And before I know it, I'm walking down the street in Los Angeles, and there was these seminar companies back then called Learning NX. It was the biggest, basically a pitch fest. Now there's other companies that do their own version of it, but they put about 10,000 people in a room, and they got the headliner, the Magic Johnson. At this one, it was Magic Johnson, Donald Trump, Susie Orman, Robert Kiyosaki. You go there, you see the headliner, the famous athlete, what's the football, Tom Brady. They have these events, and then they have a bunch of speakers coming in, talking for an hour to 45 minutes to pitch. They're pitch people. So it's basically a pitch fest, and you're there to see the famous person, but you gotta kind of sit through all these pitches. And when I went to the event, I'm expecting it was $97, which was a stretch for me. I still didn't have much money. I was getting out of a lot of debt and things like that. And I go to this thing and I almost left because it wasn't that good. Now, by the way, I love Pitch Fest. I'm like, what are they doing? What can I learn? But, it was whatever. And the speakers were, above, they were very good, but not great. And then Tony comes out, and it was just like this, and he was supposed to speak for 2 hours. He spoke for like 4.5, and he does interventions, and he's like finding people in suicide, and he's just this outrageous thing. He spoke this extra 4 hours, and I cried, I laughed, I was so engaged. And I'm all the way in the back because I'm in the general admission section, but I felt this man, and I was like, man, I don't know what that is, but I want some of that. And he made an offer from stage. And I've thought about this so much time. He didn't have some fancy pitch. At the end of it, I remember he said this. He says, "If you got anything out of these 4 hours, spend 4 days with me, I'll change your fucking life, or I'll give you your fucking money back." It's just it's outrageous and certain and real and honest. He did a lot to frame to get somebody to that place of responsiveness and compliance and authority based on real human connection, where, when you have an experience of something, it's undeniable. And so I spent my rent money to sign up for his UPW event. And, there was no turning back from there. I went to the event, and, I'll land this plane soon. I could talk about this for an hour, but, I remember I went to that event, and it's also one of those things where you can go for the first, day and a half, get your money back. I went there fully expecting I'm just going to go for a day and a half and get my money back. But that's how they get you. I was just like, man, this is so powerful, and I can't let this go. On that last day, he also talks about how people come to an environment, a self-development event. They go somewhere and they're pumped up, like they're just like, my whole life has changed, but they go home to what's called an environment that's not ecologically sound. There needs to be a supportive environment. You go to a yoga retreat for a week, drinking green juice, you come home to a house full of donuts. Pretty soon the environment has, deconditioned the change. And he would talk a lot about, basically like putting yourself in an environment. And, and of course that's a seed to sign up for the coaching. So you get that continuing support. And, I wasn't aware of it then, but I was thinking like, man, it'd be, really cool to do that. And I was thinking about doing the thing, and I ended up doing everything. But I went to the bathroom, and I had connected with this guy, and he's like, I'm going to be on stage with Tony. I'm going to work, for Tony. And I was like, that's a good idea. And Tony talks about, there's thousands of people there. He's like, so few people when you're, people are poor or good or excellent or outstanding. Outstanding means you do whatever it takes. And he's like, there's only a few of you in this room that will be like, really like, just push this thing, take what you, and I was like, that's going to be me. And I thought, he told all these stories, and I was like, man, it'd be cool to, to work with this man. And I remember on the first day of that event, I was so broke, and I was very lean, and I was doing like personal training sessions in a park. I had already learned so much from Tony's CDs, and I had changed my, got rid of my job and all this stuff at this point. I had no money. And I remember I just off the CDs, I don't tell the story all the time, but he talks about how you can just, if you're in this state, you can do anything. And I lived on the back part of Santa Monica, California. And there was a park there called Cloverfield Park. I remember like, what resources do I have? Like this resource of emotion. And I was pretty fit. I was pretty lean, wasn't eating very much. And just eating like cans of tuna, basically, with mustard and mayo packets that I got from the store. And I went to that park, and I'd walk around, and I did like group exercise classes for donation only. And I made like a couple $1,000, just having people just grabbing old ladies. Hey, let's stretch, all that stuff. I had my bucket out there, just talking to people, and they're like, man, you're amazing. And I'm like, you're amazing, and just, I was in this state that he talked about. And I learned so much from the experience, and I didn't, the fear started to go away. And I was like, I don't want to let this go. And on that first day of the UPW event that I went to, I met these girls, and, they wanted to go have a bite of lunch. And I was like, no, I got my food here. Really, I just had my 2 cans of tuna inside of my backpack. And on that first day, Tony told a story that he doesn't tell that often, but it was about, some of the ups and downs in his life. And he talked about some books that changed things for him, and reading it again. The book was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, very famous book. And he talked about, he's like, yeah, if you haven't read this like 3 times, you've not read it, like read it again. And the book was in my backpack. And so I go out and I'm eating my tuna, mustard packets, Trader Joe's Tongal tuna. I have my can opener in there, like really fancy, sitting out front of the Los Angeles Convention Center. And I pick up that book as I'm eating my tuna, and I open it up. And the first story in that book is about a man named Edward C. Barnes, who's living as a bum in railway cars in Orange City, New Jersey. And he gets this idea because he hears about the genius of the time, a man named Thomas Edison. And he says, I want to be partners with Thomas Edison. And it put a seed in my mind, put another seed in my mind. And he, so I wrote down that day in my workbook, and I still have it, I'm going to be partners with Tony Robbins. I go in there, and I'm thinking through this and all these ideas. Fast forward, obviously after the event, I had an amazing time. I met some people at the event that worked for Tony, got their business cards and things like that. After the event, I reached out, I got blown off. I called Tony's company over 200 times in a period of 2 weeks. And I was like, they're going to give me a job. taking out the trash or doing something, or they're going to put me in jail. But I'm just like that whole ultimate success formula. They know what you want, know why you want it, keep on changing your approach until you get it. I was like, I'm going to do the thing. I'm going to do the Tony thing, on the Tony thing. I go to this, eventually I get through to the right person. It was like the vice president of sales or something. There's a guy named Lester. And I go down to Tony's company. He gives me a 28-page script. He said, come back here in 2 weeks, perform this thing, and don't fuck up any words. He's like, you got to nail this. Part of the story I didn't go into, part of the reason I kind of went into this, when I went to the event, I was really in a bad place. I'd left my job. I wasn't in a good place. I had been cast to be Superman in the movie Superman Returns. And even though I've been working on myself, when you're auditioning for a movie and there's all these like casting directors, the directors, all these people are there, and you're basically reading a script on camera, and you've memorized some stuff, or they cold read, and your face, it's like this. If you look at the camera right now, it's like, so my face is up on a huge screen, and everybody's looking at my face. This is like the on camera screen test, and it's different things. And it just probably more in my head than it was. It probably wasn't my face was that big, but you could see the uncertainty in my eyes. And if you look at somebody when there's fear, their pupils will begin to shake, and there's some tells in the body language when they're not truly there. I mean, when you look at like a Tom Cruise, for example, when he acts, that dude is there. Even other actors are like, fuck, this dude he is there, but he's a professional. And I was not there, regardless of how much I rehearsed the script, like a lot of salespeople, I wasn't there. And that's what, Tony's message really said something to me. And I thought it was like, if I say these fancy things to the girl, the pickup line, the this, the that, or if I have the right objection handler type thing, but I was like, there's a force inside of a human being that once they're connected to it and it's aligned, and we have things where we get out of alignment, we get incongruencies sometimes, but that leaks power. And this man was powerful. And I was like, there's something there I got to figure out. So I go down there, I get this interview. They give me this script. I did have some acting training, but I really took this thing seriously. I recorded it on a tape player. I had this thing looping on, I went to bed with the script playing. I put no cards. All I did for those 2 weeks, like every waking second, was saying these words out of my mouth. And I go down there to Tony's company, and they put you in a room, and it's like 20 people coming, all the salespeople, coaches, and they're there really just to fuck with you, like laughing, looking at their phone, all of that stuff. And they want to see how you respond. And of course, they want you to win. I did this presentation. I nailed it. And, there's people later on when I started, I'll say this now, when I started training the other speakers for Tony and facilitating these interviews, there'd be guys and girls that came in and you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to be a stud. They're going to be amazing. It's like 6'5", 6'6", handsome guy. And we're like, man, this guy's going to be like the next Tony, really confident. And then somebody would like look at their phone. He's like, hey, what the fuck are you doing? Or somebody would challenge him and he'd get angry, or some people would start to cry. You're like, woo. And then there'd be like a little girl or somebody that you think's not going to be very impressive. And they don't speak the best, and they don't, they're not eloquent with their words, but in those moments of challenge, you see who they are, and they lean in even more, not from a place of anger, but connection. And, they use a little humor or something there. I'm like, well, that is special. And I didn't know it at the time, but, I had some of that they liked. Halfway through my interview, the guy who was in charge of all the sales and everything, a guy named Gene McNaughton, came in and, basically really liked what he saw. They gave me the job. And, before I know it, I'm in Philly, then New York, then Colorado. I basically had this job, the same job that Tony had for Jim Rohn, I had for Tony, where they drop you off in a city every couple months in a new city with no contacts. You're door knocking, you're doing whatever you can, ideally to get into commission-based companies, real estate, car lots, insurance, any place that has weekly meetings, because I'd want to speak. I gotta get through the gatekeeper. I gotta connect with the boss, convince him to give me their weekly meeting so that I can do it. Also frame it as not a pitch fest, but really get these aligned incentives, get us on the same side of the table, create an enemy and his underperforming team. So, I practiced a lot of this, and, I booked myself to speak 400 times. So I did the same presentation for Tony 3,400 times. And we had a basic script, but it really evolved over the years. And I'd see what Tony would do, or I'd see other speakers and what they would do. And I'd be like, ooh, that's good. I'm going to use that. And I tested literally hundreds and hundreds of stories, it's reframes. I'd see Tony do stuff or exercises, and I just want to test it. Initially when I wanted to test stuff, I'd see Tony do some intervention where he's like cussing at somebody, like, don't be a fucking bitch. And then I tried that in somebody else's meeting. Didn't always go out so well. But I tested a lot of stuff. A lot of it didn't work. But, over the years, through those thousands of presentations, I began to recognize some patterns, develop some patterns. And now when we look at, sales or speaking or a webinar, there's of course a framework, but there's a subtext, a subconscious alignment of values, of needs. And the more that we can begin to understand that, look for that, see behind the mask, and show up in a powerful way with some skills, with some reframes, the results get a heck of a lot better. So I cut some things out, but I didn't want to just talk the whole time.
No, it's absolutely incredible. But going from you pretty much selling in that way to then carving out your own way of ethical selling or ethical influence. What is ethical influence, and how did you build this model of ethical influence?
We call our process the Trust Trinity. It's like I'm a little slow in the fact that I did thousands of presentations, and maybe like 1,500, 1,600, something like that. I had times where like it was really hard to connect with people, and I had times where like you get, here's what you guys often get. I was a salesperson going to sales companies to sell salespeople that knew I was there to sell, that did not want to be sold. So it's really amazing now when I speak on some of these stages. Some people know who I am. Most people don't know who the frick I am. But I often, when I speak at a company or speak at a seminar now, I have more personal sales than everybody in the room combined. And so some people like yourself have heard about me. I've been done this for a long time, and we just had the biggest brand. So I had more opportunity, not because I'm so great, the company, I give a lot of credit. I just had more opportunity. I spoke twice a day for a decade. And going back to what Tony's saying about, recognizing patterns. And the master skill of all masters is recognizing patterns, utilizing patterns, and then creating patterns. And as I thought deeply about that, I began to look at some of the presentations that I did where the audience was very cold, almost angry that I was there. But something shifted, and I'd sell the entire room. And Tony has this line, any of you guys are listening that are Tony fans. He says, at the end of your life, you won't remember everything. You remember certain magic moments, a time with your kids or this or that. And I thought to myself, well, how does that apply? And by the way, I took really the process of what we've done with sales. I took a lot of what I learned from Tony, and I thought, or NLP or hypnosis or whatever. And a lot of, like 90% of it was garbage. And that's why some people think that it's garbage. 90% of it's fucking garbage. It makes no sense. But I was like, the 10% that's really useful, like, how do I apply that specifically to a sales context? Because this isn't like change your life, Tony Robbins therapy session. This is me reframing your belief patterns, creating an experience and anchoring you down in a new set of choices that you get to have in your life. But I got to open you up. We got to do some things. And so I began to interview people that I had done presentations, at, and I just asked people questions like bosses, things like that. And I said, what point in my presentation did you become open to buying from me? And it wasn't the discount. It wasn't it wasn't the secondary close. I was like, at what point did you become open? And we're like, oh, when you told that story. So going back to what Tony said, you're not going to remember everything in your life. You remember these moments. I'm like, they're not going to remember everything in my freaking presentation, but they're going to remember these key moments. And if I could, somebody will call me unethical for saying this, but if I could manufacture these moments. And when you see anybody that's really good, stage performer, Tony Robbins, like, make note, a great movie, like they have manufactured these moments. And it's not a script paint by numbers. I'm manufacturing these moments based on the elements, the ingredients, if you will, of what's there. I'm utilizing what's there. And internally, the ingredients are there is one, a belief that whatever shows up, I can handle. And I'm excited to handle it. And whether it's a salesperson or a speaker, you can feel when somebody has fear. And regardless of the technique, like you can give somebody the best sales script, but if they got social anxiety and fear, they're gonna fuck it up. And so what is the internal script that I'm running? What is this internal process that I can create? And really the way that I began to see sales is a transference of belief. So I got to be clear in my beliefs about me, about what I'm saying, about what I'm offering, and about who these people are and who they could be. And so if I'm certain in that and I'm aligned and I really do have somebody's best interest involved, and a law of rapport says that people like people who are like themselves, so I'll create some commonality, manufactured, and people like people or how they want to be. And few people are courageous, brave, bold, loving, warm. And I think in our essence, we all want to be more of that. And so I don't just say I am that. That'd be weird. I give them an experience of it that's undeniable, where you have an experience of what this is. And then some people still resistant to the experience based on their own, past references, where they saw a guy named Eli who sold them and it was a terrible experience. And now they're projecting that shit onto me, and I'm even asked, well, in that experience, what else could that have meant? Is it possible this? So I might need to use some of these tools that we've learned to reframe a meaning. What else could that mean? Or I tell a story. And so I began to play with different mental models and reframes. And, I would go to a Tony event every few months. He'd do his UPW. And this is before iPhones and transcription and all of that stuff. I would take a small tape recorder, set it on the speaker. We weren't allowed to or supposed to, but I would do it anyway. I'd come home that night and I would listen to it and I would type by hand everything that came out of Tony's mouth, like hours and hours and hours. I'd print it up and then I would take like a pink highlighter and I would highlight his questions. And I began to notice patterns in his questions and like, why did he ask that question? Or, why does he always do this thing? In this situation, what is he going for? What's his intent? What are some of the things in the subtext beyond just what he's saying and what is he looking for? And fortunately, after a couple of years in the company, Tony's son wanted to be a speaker and his brother-in-law. And Tony said to his son, he said, well, you should do a ride along with all the other speakers, salespeople, meet them, phone people, all of that. And then you should live with the person who you feel is the best. They did ride-alongs with all the salespeople and everybody's really good. They were all like amazing. We all had the same script and everybody, their hearts are there. But Scott Humphrey, who's Tony's brother-in-law, came back and told me the story. He said, yeah, we did ride-alongs with everybody. Everybody's amazing, but you have this one fucking guy. You have this one guy who's like just unbelievable, and I remember specifically the meeting they came to shadow me to see how I showed up. And there was some guy that was like being a douche to me. It was a Century 21 somewhere in bumfuck Jersey. And this guy, it just like, I destroyed this guy with care, but it was just like, I was not like, something to prove. I was humorous. I was smiling, but there was an energy there. Like, listen, and there was the dynamic and there was just like, the room just like stopped. And cause I wanted to be like Tony, I was like, how would Tony do this? And, I would have situations where of course I didn't sell people. I got stuck. And, as a salesperson, you get into a belief, well, those are broke people. Those are this people, it's not possible to sell those people. You completely fucked yourself when you believe that. And my question was always this, like, could Tony Robbins have sold that person? And I'd be like, fuck, yeah, he could have sold them. And not that there's something wrong with me. What patterns is he looking for? What patterns are in his belief? What patterns could I begin to model and adapt? And so I really thought deeply about that. And I journal every day about, how I'm showing up, what's being transferred, what new skills that I might need to have in that. But I always start out with the belief that it's possible. And, for when I do my keynote and things like that, or, we're creating a new course right now, Seed. When I start off one of these sections with this quote that I picked up that changed my life when I was struggling in sales. And it was, early on in my career, but I remember as I was going through all the self-development stuff, I listened to the GOAT of basketball, a guy named Michael Jordan, way better than LeBron, in case there's any doubters out there. Michael Jordan. Michael said this thing that just like melted my brain. He said, I never lost a basketball game. I only ran out of time. And when I think of that, and so here's how this shows up for me in a sales context. I never lose. I can sell anybody I might need to be your best friend. I might need to do a crazy discount. I might need to move in next to you. I might need to walk your dog every day for the next 5 years and sell you a $2 thing. But if I did all that, of course I fucking could. But that might not be worth it to me. But it's possible. Now, I might have to do a lot of things that I'm not willing to do. So as much as I'm wanting you to do something that's in your best interest, I'm also clear in my boundaries. And part of what makes somebody attractive as a man, as a woman, just as a human being, is the fact that you have boundaries. And so I'm clear in that. Yeah, this is better for you. And yeah, I could, but I won't. You know, that dynamic of, yeah, but I can, make no doubt. I know that it's possible. So I have no victim mindset. I have no psychology where I can't, or because this person's broke or whatever, I'm like, yeah, I could, but that's not worth it to me. And so that energy that you can bring, it's like the guardian around your offer. Yeah, and you know, you hear this kind of cheesy thing in webinars and things like that, which is true and untrue. It's not framed correctly, but people like, we got this great community. We want action takers. You know, we don't want people taking. Are you a giver? Getting people to buy into the fact that they're a giver or a good person, it is a frame and it's useful. But at the same time, when it's real and people can feel that you have boundaries and that you've got something valuable that you believe in and you're not needy, it's another layer. It's another that you don't need to script out. It's a way of being. And we've all know these self-development, you know, the ultimate self-development formula is be to have. And people want to have more money in sales or business. Well, what do you got to do? You got to do some things. But two people can do the same things and have the same goals, but get totally different results based on who they're being. And really, you know, as we go deeper, and I'm, you know, making changes all the time in my life, and I find more and more, you know, if you're young, you want to learn the scripts and all of that stuff. And of course, there's going to be skills that you always want to learn. But, you know, I heard this one time, when things aren't working for you, it's because they're working on you. And they're going to continue to work on you until you become the person who can handle it. So life is always working on us and for us, for our own expansion, to expand the container of what we have the capacity to do. And yes, there's some skills involved, but you know, and all the sales trainers talk about skills and things like that. And yes, you need it. It's a big deal, but there's a lot of people out there that, you know, get the same skills, but have very different results. And so I think equally, if not more important, is who they're being, because here's the other side. I've met people, no fucking sales skills, never taken a course, but influential. You're just like, man, that person owns themselves. Like, I want some of that. They're comfortable challenging people without offending them. You know, it's a way of being. It's a psychological process of what they believe about conversations, their offers themselves, the human being in front of them. And so what we did is, as I was going through all of this, closing this loop, you know, I began to interview people in my presentations, and it was like, you know, they said, well, you know, I said, what point did you become open? And they said, well, I felt like I could trust you. And I said, well, and so I didn't stop there. I said, how did that occur for you? Like, how did that occur? Like, what shifted? What did you see? Where did things begin to dissolve? Where did I begin to kind of knock out the legs that were supporting the belief that I wasn't trustworthy? What made you believe I wasn't trustworthy? So it's like, I asked a lot of questions. And, you know, me and Eli, my business partner, Eli Sanchez, in my opinion, the best sales coach out there, absolutely amazing human. And we came up with a process called the Trust Trinity. And this is really, you know, things we talked about, things that I observed, and a lot of what I observed watching Tony Robbins. So one, the Trust Trinity is getting people to trust in you. Two, it's your offer, your product, your service. Like, they got to trust the thing will actually work. And I think that's where most presenters, salespeople get stuck. They're trying to sell you on, like, hey, I've done this and our company does this. And they're trying to prove, which is weird. It's like, you know, the guy hitting on the girl, hey, well, I have a nice car and I got a 401k and, you know, we could have it's like, this is not how you do it. They're proving their worth. They're trying to present themselves as an authority to create credibility, but it's actually coming off less trustworthy. It's the need of something to prove something, which is weak. So how do we actually get people to trust us? And it's easier than most people think. You know, most people do anything in their attempt to get people to trust them that they're actually coming off needy, weak, and it's killing trust. So the primary ways are through story and style, and we teach on that. And then there's the offer. We got to get them to trust in the offer, But here's one of the techniques that I'll share. Getting people to buy your thing, it really starts at, at the very beginning. It's how you frame everything. And like a tenet in my own teaching is we frame early, reinforce often. But the frame of the conversation, the frame of the presentation is the context. When you hire somebody into your company, it's that initial onboarding is the frame that basically determines their behavior. And so we want to control context as much as we can. And when I did the pitch, Tony called me a couple of weeks before, during COVID, or, his brother-in-law called me, I should say. Tony reached out. He didn't call me, he texted me. And they wanted me to do the pitch for the first virtual event. 25,000 people signed up, 75,000 people ended up being there, and they wanted me to do the pitch. They put me in a room, that big circle thing, and they interviewed me, and then I stand up and I did a pitch. 8-figure event, all of that, almost none of it because of me. It's not that I'm so great with the pitch. I basically memorized the script. But the way that it worked, there was the offer I made for Business Mastery, but you were selling the product, which became a need based on the enrollment of the context in the process. So what does that sound like? So the through line of the event was creating your own economy. So listen to the needs that I lay down for you here. There's so much uncertainty in the world right now. People losing their lives, losing their jobs, industries wiped out overnight. And you need to know this. Right now, there's only one way that you can have certainty in these times of uncertainty. And what is that? Is to create your own economy. Now, what does it mean to create your own economy? It means you do what you want, when you want. It means you live life on your terms. How many of you want to create your own economy? Say yes. Say yes. So, creating your own economy is the through line. And when people are making an offer from stage, and I just had some very smart, 7-8-figure people over here today, and they showed me their pitch, and I was like, you're just fucking up so much. What Tony's selling and what needs to be sold, what Moats Grace offers, they're selling something that links to values. So in this example, create your own economy, we're selling freedom. We're selling freedom. When I make my pitch, tomorrow I'm doing a webinar on webinars, I say, hey, I get to sell 1 hour a week. It's like 2 hours a week. I do a presentation and I'm not on calls. I'm not chasing people. If you want to be an authority as a coach in your niche or as an entrepreneur, you can't chase people. It's seen as weak. And what I'm offering you is an opportunity to just sell for 2 hours a week. And that takes care of everything that you need to do. And then you can have your team follow up, but the majority of sales is done in 2 hours a week. And then with the other 166 hours, you spend time with your family. You work on the marketing for your business. You get people to the presentation. You show up powerfully because most people don't know who you are. And then when you do get them to know who you are, then you have an experience of you in a high converting presentation that again does what? All the selling for you. So I'm selling time with your family. I'm selling not having to position yourself as a douche reaching out and get some fucking respect. So it's like, I'm not selling a webinar course. I'm selling into people's values, and people buy when they can link their deepest needs, wants, and values to your product, service, or idea and to you to be an experience of that.
Eli, do you know when you were talking about selling on stage?
Yes.
Then we'll also look at people who sell on calls. Do you think either can learn the other? Do you think people who sell on Zoom calls, phone calls, can learn stage selling? Do you think people do stage selling? What's the real skill difference?
Well, anybody can learn anything. That's my belief. I can learn how to play basketball. Doesn't mean I'm going to be Michael Jordan, but we can all learn. So yeah, it's like, I did phone sales, and phone sales, like we're coming out with this sales course, and we can do it, and it's everything, and I can do it, and I'm doing more of it now just because I like doing it, and it's fun to do, but it's time consuming. And so if you're a business owner, it's like, I think you have to learn it. But all business owners, like creating content, that's speaking. Everything's a presentation. Steve Jobs built the whole company, Apple, off presentations. It's like they presentation. A webinar is a presentation. A 3-day seminar is just one long presentation. A VSL is a presentation. An ad is a presentation. And so I think, it used to be, and you could be some copywriter, this, that, and you can still have a good life. But the people that are really going to dominate, and there's all this about personal branding, I don't know about that. You know, it's useful to have. I mean, Alex Ramosi, great speaker, but he's been doing it for a while. And so it's like, it's a skill. And just like with anything, you need reps. And then it's one thing, people start off, they're self-conscious, they're conscious of themselves. And so we need to attach them to a purpose, to a vision, like what's the outcome? Where are they taking this audience? And, you know, really it's leadership. And you can go through life not being a leader, not being a speaker, not selling one to many, not being on stage presenting, but I believe that you'll be limited. And the people that, you know, are the most successful in the world, they have this skill. Even Napoleon Hill, you know, talks about the power of great oratory. Warren Buffett says the most valuable course he ever took was a public speaking course from Dale Carnegie, like 10 billion years ago, maybe a little less, but a long time ago. It was like, you know,
I'd love to do a little segment with you, just to digress for a second. I'd love to do a segment where I would name different influential people from different realms, and I'd like you to tell me what makes them influential and what is it that a specific person is doing to make themselves influential. Is that okay? You up for it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the easy one that you will know, and I've got around 5 or 6 for you. So the first one that we've got is Tony Robbins. What makes him influential?
This will be the only one that I go a little bit longer on, and then I'll spitfire him off just for time constraints. I'm at an event with Tony Robbins, and it's a small group of us. He asked us this question. He says, why do you think people spend, you know, come from all over the world, like 100 and some countries, and they come here to this event with money they don't have? People work a job, you know, they get 2 weeks off a year, they skip vacation. Some people work on the crew and they're working 18, 19, 20-hour days. They don't sleep. Why do you think they do that? And you know, I'm like, because Tony, you're the best, you know, because they want to change their life. And, you know, it was me and just a few other people, and we had all these answers. And he goes, no. He says, because I love them. And they know that I love them. And he cried, and then I cried like I'm about to do now. And I was like, man, this guy cares so much. It's like, it's so real. You know, it's like you meet these people on stage, or, you know, you meet these speakers, these presenters, these salespeople, and you're like, is this real? And when he said that day, like I start crying right now. It's just like, man, this guy like is really real. And, you know, and I've seen him behind the stage where he's not slept for days, like literally days, you know, and he just, the amount of work and effort, and he doesn't need the money. It's just like this is real. And I think we're all starving for something real, and whether it's in sales or in business. And, you know, we all want to make money and have a good life, but it's like when somebody's telling you in a sales context or they're speaking, you're like, do I believe this person? Is this person real? And I think we're all skeptical. And even after working for Tony for years at that point, we're still a little, you know, it's like, you're the best, or, you know, I want to change your life. He's like, nah, it's because I love them. When he said it, it just pierced me. I just start crying. So I think people are, you know, you notice when something's real. And, you know, here in, you know, in Miami, there's some people not real, whatever. You know, you might even bring up this person. We had some friends over, and we watched this girl who's gotten very good at sales. And people are like, why do you think this girl's, her name is Shelby Sapp. You might, who she is, she became very famous. And I was like, you know, and I heard some things that she did. Somebody sent me a video. I'm like, oh, I wrote that objection handler like 12 years ago. It was, you know, whatever. But I was like, this girl is a star. And she's like pierced this niche because she's amazing.
She's definitely a star.
She's a star. I was like, you know, I don't know about the sales skill stuff, but it's just her personality. And like, she did a pitch, and then she talked for 2 more hours, just like closing. And it was just an energy. Like, this girl is freaking amazing. Like, wow, what a star. And so I think people, you know, they want to connect to something. And so for Tony, it's just, there's
does things with love. So what makes Tony influential? He does it out of love.
Yeah, love. Yeah, he cares. Okay.
What makes Donald Trump influential?
Giving no fuck. He's so authentic. So authentic. I could go on a whole thing about that, but he just...
No, go on. I want to learn real. Why that person is influential.
He's just real. Authentic. Gives no fucks, you know? Yeah. He just says what's on his mind. And in the political world, we doubt everything. He's like the most honest politician ever. And some people say he's a liar, but he just like, you know, there's been times that he just broke the internet with just being honest. Yeah, I think he's the most real and most honest.
I'm just going to name different people. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of them or not, but all of these people have influence. So the goal is to understand why they're influential.
I
So,
like everybody, so it's all good.
Tony is because he does things out of love. Trump, it's because he doesn't give a fuck. And if we can go more technical on that as well, what is Trump doing specifically? Because everyone says he's really funny. So
Very
he doesn't
funny.
give a
That's what I
fuck.
was
He's
just thinking.
funny.
So funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, just I think it's the stamina too. I mean, he's 78, 79 and, got COVID. He just doesn't stop. He's relentless. And a lot of people just feel, it's the demonstration of the congruency, some people say this or that, but he's unabashedly himself. And I think most people, they want to be that, even if you don't like it, most people are that, I don't think anybody's that bold. It's really, it's interesting to see. Love him or hate him, it's pretty badass.
What makes Andrew Tate so influential?
Again, it's raw. He's so smart, very intellectual. He says a lot. All these men, most of them say things that I wouldn't say, but yeah, it's just also the connection to, and this is something I've been studying a lot, the dark masculine, like being unapologetic for who you are and your desires, not in a way that hurts people, but there has been a feminization of the men. And so he's calling something out boldly and he is congruent with that. So I would just say he represents the dark masculine in a lot of ways where people, and his presence is relieving a lot of young men of shame, where they can be something, not to be offensive or anything like that. But yeah, I'd say it's his authentic masculine.
What makes Ty Lopez so influential?
I lived next to Ty for years. I used to go over his house all the time. Interesting guy. He's very smart, and he mentions all these books and things like that, and it creates a feeling in you he knows things that I don't. And so you see him as wise and smart, and then you see all the things that he's done. They tried so many things, and then he just grabbed his phone and, hey, here in my car, here in my garage, Hollywood Hills, but it wasn't too long ago, couch 47. So he's very smart, very charismatic, and I think that it's the need for knowledge, and he was the first one to say don't go to college. So he has been very congruent in his beliefs around what it takes to be successful. And he is an example of making yourself more intelligent through books and resources to better yourself. And so he's branded himself in that way. So he represents coming out of it through intelligence, and that also seeds what he's going to sell, but it's done very, very eloquently,
And the final person, what makes Alex Hormozi so influential?
Alex is just, I remember I hopped on a few calls with Alex, and we helped Jim launch with the sales. And eventually, originally we met at an event, and I was like, I just spoke at the event because he was speaking, and he comes up to me, he's like, oh my God, you're Eli. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you're Alex. He says, can we hop on a call? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why? He's like, I want to pitch you. And when we hopped on the call, he showed me all the people applying to acquisition.com, none of them acquisition ready. We talked about why. He had so much data and charts and pie charts and everything. I was like, wow, that was really amazing. And originally we talked about him doing a one-day event, getting those people there. Then was doing the pitch, because his whole thing was like, I'm Hormozi, I've done nothing to sell you. And so I was like, I'll sell it for you. Yeah, he ended up doing the first one on his own. I actually was going through the text last night, and his brand is so strong. Like, he's delivered more value. I mean, if Tony Robbins does a YouTube video, maybe in a week it has 50,000 views, Hormozi has 2 million. I've never seen anybody and so I told Alex this too. I said, well, the way that we sell people and the way that I've done it, it's really about producing these states and these emotions. And it's very much like we sell with emotion. He's so logical. It's so logical. And he's like, I said, my style and what we can teach you. If I had the conversation with him again, I would show him some things that I think could clearly help him, that we helped Jim launch out with, some framing stuff. But it's different in the fact that he's just like this very matter of fact, and he owns it. And he's like, if you did more reps, it'd be unreasonable. Like his ability to use real logic in business and sales, I'm like, nobody's done that since Socrates and shit, and he's like the Socrates of business, and his congruency and his work ethic, and he's incredibly good communicator, and he's in great shape, and he's handsome, and he's he's just like when I first met him too, I was thinking he was a small guy. He's fucking huge, and just like they're like, does this guy have any flaws? I'm just like, you're just like, what an awesome guy.
So Alex Hormozi is selling with extreme logic. So what makes him influential is selling with pure logic. And he did 100 million in his webinar, 100 and something million. Is that the most incredible webinar you've seen? Did you watch it?
Yeah, I did watch parts of it. I have the deck. I have all the 1,600, 1,700 slides. I've studied it a bit, and so I started a podcast. We were so behind on filming, but with Jason Fladlin, and Jason is the one that taught Alex, and Jason saw me speak and was really impressed. So we started a podcast together, just a handful of episodes. But Jason's like the one person I study with this stuff. Really brilliant, different than how I do it. We're teaching webinars in my thing. I do it differently, but Jason's the person I've learned, outside of Tony, Jason, maybe a few other people for sure, but Jason I've learned so much from, and he helped Alex a lot with that, the framing, the seating, the this, that, ways to get engagement. I do it differently, but I did study it, and it's great. Nobody could model it though. Nobody could do what Alex has done. Nobody has that much proof.
Yeah.
It's the proof that he has. And so if somebody else could take it like a script and do the same thing, it's who he is, it's the work ethic, it's the proof, it's like, and he just went so big with it. It's like people will try to copy this and that. It's impossible. There's techniques that are useful. Is it the best I've ever seen? For me, seeing Tony do stuff, I'm a little biased. But based on my value system. But yeah, it's phenomenal. They put so much into it, so great. It is epic.
Proof is 100% the biggest thing, because let's say you had a social media account and you could only post one piece of content and on this account, and your goal was to get the most amount of sales, but you can only post one content. You would post a testimonial.
Yeah.
You wouldn't post, this is what I've done, this is all the things about me. You wouldn't post a value, you wouldn't post entertainment. You would just post one testimonial, because it'll be the thing that will get people over the line. And then after we've now looked at all of these different people and how they've got influence over their market, how can the average person get more influential? How can someone who is struggling in life, or someone who is wanting to do better in sales, or anyone out there, gain more influence over their life? This person feels like they've got no control. So they have a negative reality. Their mind is negative. They're not an optimist, they're a pessimist. How can this person become more influential?
Well, the way that anybody changes their life, you got to change your environment, got to change your habits. I wake up in the morning, my goals, my visualization, the exercise. A lot of times too, when you feel lost, and I've studied the mental, the emotional, the physical, but also the spiritual side of this, and spiritual, just energy, low vibe, apathy, shame, guilt, depression, up into anger, more energy, then courage, joy, peace, enlightenment. And then sometimes too, when you're down, you gotta fucking move, you gotta work out, you gotta break through, you gotta just move something and prove to yourself that you're doing something, and build some proof, some evidence within yourself, confidence in yourself, confiding in yourself, even if it's just small things that you do every day, to build the bridge of communication with yourself and trust yourself more, because that's the foundation to get people to trust you, is trusting in yourself. And so that foundation has to be there.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. And then they take a course or they get a sales script, and, they think, oh, I studied this thing. I'm like, yeah, that helps. And you should master and breathe the script, but scripts don't sell people. People sell people. And it's like, to be a powerful person, you got to sell yourself on doing the work every day. Especially, there's an incongruency if you're asking people to do things that you're not willing to do yourself. And so there's got to be that. And I wish there was just one thing. And with sales, when I do sales trainings at companies and stuff, I say, I wish there was one magic line you could say to have sex with all the girls, the pickup line, or there's one magic thing that you could say to sell all the things, or there's one reframe. And the fact that you will if you study all of them and you master all of them, it's more an aspect of your character. You were the one, to do it. It's like those things aren't just working for you, they're working on you as you're doing the work. All work works. And so it's just like being willing, and the times when you're down, You need for a lot of these people that are down, what they've lost because they're down, because they're in low vibe, they've lost a compelling future. And
Yeah.
when people kill themselves, it's because they associate, they're more focused on the past and the present or the future. So they're not even here and they're rerunning the story. And when people lose like something to pull them out of bed, they lose a compelling future, and that's part of the sales process. We're getting people enrolled in an outcome, pulling them out of a dark place so they can see, like feel and experience now something of what it could be that excites them, puts energy in their body to get them associated to taking some risk, i.e. investing to do that thing. But we're building the bridge through trust and certainty. But a lot of people have lost that, especially when they've been down for a while. So, how to get there, it's a longer conversation to give you a real answer. But at the end of the day too, it's a few things, habits, rituals, some goals, being in a supportive environment, having a coach, having somebody hold you accountable, challenging you, all those things.
And it is really doing the work, does the work on you. And that's what changes you, and that's the person that you become. And you named the kind of the map of consciousness as you were talking about the different emotions. Do you look at yourself in that way, which is like, where am I on the map of consciousness? Or do you use it in that way? How do you use, because you went through the different emotions, so I'm eager to hear how, because you've done some internal work to have this level of understanding. So if you can just talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I was going for a walk this morning, and there's this affirmation that Tony said when Tony went from broke to really broke and then making seven figures. He had this one affirmation that he said all the time, and I think about it, I say it, and sometimes I meditate on it. And I was meditating on it this morning as I was walking around. With the affirmation is this: God's wealth circulates into my life. His wealth flows to me in avalanches of abundance. All my needs, desires, and goals are met instantaneously by infinite intelligence. So I give thanks for all my good now and for all of God's riches, for I am one with God and God is everything. And so the word God or infinite intelligence, what we're really saying is energy. And what people need to get as it relates to, and sometimes you have a pocket of shame, or your pocket of grief or a pocket of anger or whatever, you can feel these things activate and just recognize that it's energy. And sometimes you want to go through them and process them, but also everything's energy. And what people need to get to really be a great speaker, communicator, leader is not just to access energy, but to be a source of energy. And what that means is that when I've got to meet people where they are. If I got an angry prospect, I might drop into the energy. They're like, yeah, I hopped on these calls before. It's all bullshit. Yeah, and it's fucking disgusting. And I'll be even more angry. And they're like, woo. And then I can take them. And so it's there's an energetic thing to it as well. Pacing and leading, meeting where they're at and all of that. But just recognizing and being just so grateful and so awed and so humbled by just energy all around us in every cell and all the way out like to infinity. It's just energy and up into the heavens or whatever. It's just like this sense of like awe and wonder with life. And then as you read all the, the more scientific elements of like what's, inside of every cell, it's 99% like empty space. And then, different vibration, whether it's this desk or a rock, density. Okay, that person's dense in the head. They're dense in their heart. Like, how do I inject some energy into them? Like this thing. And, communication just becomes a fascinating thing. How I emphasize a word, how I interrupt a pattern. Or maybe I'm strong, or maybe I'm talking a little bit and it's kind of flowy. And then I pause and let something land. Different ways of manipulating energy and the field around me with my voice and my presence and my intention. And to know, like with a brand, you're branding something on the universe or world or people. We can brand people with these emotional states. We can shift things. And so the ability to communicate with all of our being, not just what we're saying, but how it's landing and pacing and leading and asking questions and reframing, it all just becomes energy. And then the scripts that you have, the questions, the reframes, all these things become tools to help you and others access a better life. But you're just shifting energy, even getting attention with an ad, a hook, it's like, here's the thing, what if I told you, whatever. We're just all just energy. And so of course there needs to be there's a science to it, but there's also an art. And the people that are really doing well with their brand and their sales and their business, they're artists, at the highest level.
I believe like every good salesperson that has a good brand at the moment has their own way of sales. So let's say you said Hormozi was logical. Let's say Jeremy Miner is going to be more tonality based or whatever he's known for, and Cole Gordon's way more technical. I feel like you're way more of an inner work salesperson. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I've just been fascinated with all of that. And it's like, I've seen all this, all very good. We've got some stuff that we're creating now that I think will be really good. And we never really marketed our stuff. When I first started my own business, I made 7 figures like really easy with my only business expense was a $20 a month Zoom account. So we just never marketed. And, Cole started off like, in our program with, me and Taylor and Jeremy, I brought into the industry. His funnels weren't going that well. And then I did a JV with him, and, Matt became his partner, and they did all that thing, but we just never marketed. And so it's been interesting for us now as we're doing it, we're creating like a brand around me and all these things to play with that. But I just, never felt the need to sell more people other than I could talk to, which was a limitation for me. And so now I'm having to learn marketing and learning a whole different communication and energy and all that. So I'm learning that stuff now. I've never marketed before, like never really marketed. And it's a new skill for me. So I'm very bad at it, but we're learning very fast. And I'm fortunately connected to the best in the world. And people like Jeremy and Cole have helped me so much. They're really good friends. And so the style is part of, to dig into what you're saying. As a brand, we are doing that. We're kind of redefining and defining, I should say, me. Like, well, what is different about my sales process? Or what is different? This heart-centered sales, that feels weak. This, emotional sales, that seems manipulative, that seems weird. And so like we're sitting with that right now. I'm sitting with like this essence of sales, which doesn't sound, it sounds too airy-fairy, but really I'm kind of like the Tony Robbins of sales, understanding values and beliefs and all of that. But then at the same time too, as we layer this out, it gets really complex. People are like, what do I say? Like, how do we meet people where they're at and give them some, NLP reframes or a script or how to open or how to deal with resistance? What are that really simple things that I've learned from other people as well? Like, how do we simplify and classify and brand that? So that's the thought experiment we're having right now.
I think it is really selling with emotion. I think it's saying it's not manipulative, it's actually selling with emotion, because when you say the word emotion, if it's misused, it's a manipulative. But selling with emotion the right way, to recognize having good EQ and recognizing how the other person feels, is emotional intelligence. So selling with emotion is a positive.
Yeah, I think so. And sales is, I define it over here as just it's a logical understanding of a very emotional process.
Yeah, it is.
So it's but also understanding in like how you're performing or charisma. Not that people need to be charismatic. I was voted the quietest kid in high school, so I was not charismatic, but I was like, well, I think I can learn that. I think that's, I could do that. And, it's just a tool. Charismatic, being charismatic isn't required. And you could say, some of the best people I know in sales are not overly charismatic, but they've also got their own natural thing. And so as we understand and teach this, I don't want people to use energy and charisma or this or that to be like me. I want them to tap into what's inside of them, feel better about what they're saying, about what they do, to feel good about even handling an objection, not with force, but to be really curious and concerned, not just like with a tonality, but to make that real. And I think they'll have a better life and learn, life communication skills. That's what I want for people.
And if someone wants to do a webinar, or they've been running a webinar already, and they want to get some advice or work with you on it, is that something that you do? Is that something that you can help people with?
Yeah, we got like a program where I'm basically right now I'm pretty much writing people's webinars for them, and it's been very, very successful. I've been having a lot of fun, and with AI, I can really speed up the process. So we're doing that, and then we'll package it up before long and put it in a course with prompts and all those things. But it's been a lot of fun just to get people like immediate, really quick results. And then so we help people with presentations. We're doing too much over here: stage stuff, presenting stuff, speaker stuff. I got a TED Talk coming up. Writing my book. We're anybody that's in a one-to-many selling capacity, we have some amazing tools on how to frame the audience, whether it's a seminar or event, or even now webinars, because I think thanks to Hermosi, webinars are the new hot thing now.
They are. Eli, it's been amazing speaking to you. You're full of knowledge, full of selling techniques that don't come across as a technique or a gimmick. They come across as, let me understand you so I can help you.
That's it. That's it, brother.
But an amazing conversation. If people want to reach out to you, how can they find you? Where can they locate you?
Eli Wilde _sales on the Instagram, or wildeinfluence.com is the website. And we got free stuff on there and all the things, NLP, free stuff everywhere.
I appreciate everyone listening. Thank you, Eli, for joining me. If you've enjoyed this podcast, comment below, share with a friend. I'll catch you in the next one.
Awesome. Thank you.